What is time, if not a collection of fleeting moments stitched together by memory? We hold it in the wrinkles of our skin, in the photographs fading in drawers, in the songs we hum without realizing why. Some moments stay with us forever, whispering like gentle winds through the corridors of our hearts. Clara often asked herself this when the evening sun dipped low across her small kitchen window. At 48, life had given her both laughter and loss. She had loved deeply, and she had said goodbye too soon. The memory of her late husband lingered in the quiet hours of the night, in the empty chair at the dinner table, and most of all, in the eyes of their son, Ethan. Ethan was 7 years old, small for his age, delicate in frame, but filled with a quiet fire. He had been born with a condition that weakened his legs, making every step an act of courage. For Clara, every morning began with the same ritual, helping Ethan into his tiny shoes, tying the laces with steady fingers, whispering encouragement. Those shoes became more than leather and fabric. They were hope itself, carried on his fragile feet. Clara would set them by the window each night after Ethan was asleep, as if letting the moonlight kiss them might somehow give them strength. It was her silent prayer that one day those shoes would not only walk but run, carrying Ethan across grassy fields far beyond the limits the world tried to impose on him. Life in their small town moved slowly, like the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Neighbors waved as they passed, children's laughter echoed from the schoolyard, and the seasons painted the streets in shifting colors. For many, it was an ordinary place, but for Clara, every corner carried weight. The ramp leading to the school door, the benches in the park where she and Ethan often sat, even the grocery store aisle where he once asked why his legs didn't work like the other children's, all were pieces of a journey that tested her strength in ways unseen. Ethan never complained. He asked questions, yes, deep, innocent ones that often left Clara searching for words. "Mom," he asked one afternoon, his small fingers brushing the window pane, "do you think God forgot about me?" The question pierced her heart like glass. She knelt beside him, her eyes searching his. "No, sweetheart," she whispered, stroking his hair gently. "God never forgets. Sometimes he just takes longer to write certain stories." Ethan tilted his head, considering her words with the seriousness only a child could hold. Then he smiled, soft, brave, almost too wise for his years. "Then I'll wait. Stories are better when they take time, right?" Clara held back tears. That was her boy, fragile in body, yet stronger in spirit than many grown men. She thought of her husband, gone too soon, and wished he could see their son's courage. Perhaps he did, from somewhere beyond the stars. Nights were the hardest. After Ethan was tucked into bed, the silence of the house pressed heavy on Clara's chest. She often found herself sitting by the window, staring at the little shoes resting there. They seemed almost to glow under the moonlight, silent companions in her quiet battle between despair and hope. She would close her eyes and remember her own childhood, her mother's hands braiding her hair, the sound of lullabies carried by summer breezes. Time had a way of circling back, of showing her that pain and beauty often walked hand in hand. And perhaps, just perhaps, Ethan's struggles were not curses, but the soil from which strength would bloom. One evening, as autumn leaves scattered across Willow Street, Clara whispered into the stillness of the night, "I will not let him give up, not ever." Her voice cracked, but her resolve did not. The world might try to measure her son by what he could not do. She would measure him by every ounce of courage he carried, by the way he smiled despite the weight he bore. For the elderly who might listen to Clara's story, it would feel familiar. The ache of protecting a child, the endless nights of prayer, the quiet battles fought in kitchens and living rooms where no one else could see. It is a story as old as time itself, a mother's love refusing to bend, even when the world seemed unkind. And so, in that small house with the window facing west, Clara and Ethan began each day with hope and ended each night with faith. The shoes by the window waited, and so did they, because time, though fleeting, had a way of keeping its promises. Strength is not always loud or visible. Sometimes it is a mother tying her child's shoes each morning, believing in a future no one else can see. Sometimes it is the patience to wait for life's slow miracles, trusting that love will guide the way. There are objects in life that carry more than their physical weight. A wedding ring, a faded photograph, a letter folded 100 times. For Clara, it was Ethan's little shoes, worn at the tips, laces slightly frayed, always polished with her careful hands. They were more than footwear. They were a symbol, a promise. Every night, once Ethan had drifted into sleep, she placed the shoes gently on the windowsill. To anyone else, it might have seemed like habit, a mother tidying up before bed. But to Clara, it was a ritual of hope. She believed that by leaving them under the watchful eye of the moon, they absorbed strength, patience, and perhaps even a touch of heaven's blessing. Sometimes she would sit by the window after placing them there, watching the way the lamplight outside painted faint golden lines on the worn leather. The shoes seemed to glow quietly, as if whispering, "One day, one day." Ethan, too, had noticed the ritual. One morning, as Clara helped him slip his feet into them, he asked, "Mom, why do you always leave my shoes by the window?" Clara hesitated for a moment, her heart caught off guard. "Because," she said softly, "the window lets in the moonlight, and moonlight is strong, even though it looks soft. I think your shoes need that strength so they can help you walk better." Ethan's eyes widened with childlike wonder. "So, the moon is helping me?" "Yes," she smiled, tying the final knot with tender fingers. "Every night the moon and I work together for you." From that day on, Ethan never forgot to glance at the shoes before bed, sometimes even whispering to them, "Grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll try again." The innocence of his faith was both heartbreaking and beautiful. For Clara, it was a reminder that even fragile hope could shine like a lantern in the darkest corners. The town knew Ethan as the quiet boy with the determined gaze. He often sat by the school window, sketching on paper while the other children ran freely in the yard. Yet even from his seat, he cheered for them. He clapped when his classmates won races, laughed at their games, and never let bitterness seep into his words. That kindness was his strength, though many didn't see it. One chilly afternoon, as Clara picked Ethan up from school, a neighbor stopped her. Mrs. Turner, an older woman with silver hair tucked beneath a knitted hat, pointed at Ethan's careful steps with his cane and sighed. "He's such a brave boy," she said, "but it must be so hard for you, dear." Clara smiled faintly, though her heart ached. "It is," she admitted, "but he teaches me more about courage than I could ever teach him." That night, as the shoes sat by the window, Clara thought of Mrs. Turner's words. Yes, it was hard. Some nights she wanted to crumble, to cry until dawn. But then she would hear Ethan's laughter from the day echoing in her memory, and she knew she had no choice but to keep walking. For him, with him. Winter settled over Willow Street, with its quiet hush, snowflakes drifting like delicate feathers. Ethan loved pressing his face to the glass, watching the world turn white. "Do you think I'll ever play in the snow like the others?" he asked one evening, his voice small. Clara drew him close, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. "You already do," she whispered. "Every time you smile at the snow, you play with it in your own way. But yes, sweetheart, one day you'll run across it too." He leaned against her, trusting her words without doubt. That was the miracle of childhood. the ability to believe wholeheartedly, even in the impossible. Later, after Ethan fell asleep, Clara placed the shoes by the window as always. This time, she lingered longer, tracing the outline of the shoes with her fingertips. The snow outside reflected the moonlight so brightly it seemed like daylight, and for a brief moment she imagined Ethan running barefoot through the snow, arms outstretched, laughter echoing in the air. The vision was so vivid that tears filled her eyes. She pressed her hand to the glass, whispering to the stars, "Please, let him have that chance." In that small act, placing shoes by the window, whispering prayers into the night, Clara carried the weight of every parent who had ever hoped for a miracle. And though Ethan's steps were still uncertain, the shoes glowed under the winter moon, silent witnesses of a love that refused to surrender. Sometimes the greatest faith is not in seeing miracles happen instantly, but in believing they are growing quietly in the dark, like shoes gathering strength by a window, waiting for the dawn. There comes a moment in every child's life when the world feels just a little too big, a little too heavy. For Ethan, that moment came on an ordinary spring morning, under a sky so blue it seemed painted by gentle hands. At school, the playground was alive with shouts and laughter. Children raced across the field, their sneakers pounding against the earth like a joyful drumbeat. Ethan, as usual, sat near the edge, his sketchbook resting on his lap. He drew trees, birds, the outline of the sky. But that day, something stirred within him, a quiet determination, a longing not just to watch life but to step into it. "Mum says the moon makes my shoes strong," he whispered to himself, glancing down at his feet. Maybe today is the day. His teacher, Mrs. Adams, noticed the way he looked toward the children. Her heart softened. She had seen that gaze before, the longing to belong. Walking over, she crouched beside him. "Would you like to try, Ethan?" she asked gently. Ethan hesitated. "What if I fall?" Mrs. Adams smiled, her eyes kind. "Then you'll know you were brave enough to stand." Something in her words lit a spark. Slowly, Ethan pushed himself up, gripping his cane with one hand, the bench with the other. His legs trembled, but he steadied himself, breath shallow yet determined. The children noticed. One by one, they slowed their games, turning to watch. The field grew silent, save for the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Step by step, Ethan began to walk forward. His shoes, those same shoes kissed by moonlight each night, pressed into the earth as if claiming it inch by inch. For a few moments, he felt weightless, as though the whole world was holding its breath with him. But then, halfway across the field, his legs buckled, his cane slipped from his grasp, and he fell hard against the dirt. The sound of his body hitting the ground echoed louder in his heart than in the air. There was a gasp from the children, a sharp intake of worry. Ethan lay still for a moment, his cheek pressed into the earth, his tiny hands clenched. Shame flooded him. He wanted to disappear, to curl into himself until no one could see. Tears burned his eyes. "I failed," he thought. "Mom will be so sad." But before despair could root itself, something unexpected happened. A boy from his class stepped forward, Daniel, the fastest runner on the playground. Instead of laughing, he knelt beside Ethan, offering a hand. "You almost made it halfway across the field," Daniel said with awe. "That's more than I could do if my legs hurt like yours." Ethan blinked, surprised. Another voice chimed in, a girl named Lily. "You were so brave. I don't think I'd even try." Soon, the circle of children surrounded him, not with pity but with admiration. Their voices blended together. "You're strong, Ethan. You're amazing. You can try again tomorrow." Something shifted in that moment. Ethan's tears did not vanish, but they mixed with something warmer, pride. He had fallen, yes, but he had also stood, and in standing he had shown courage bigger than his small frame. When Clara arrived that afternoon, Mrs. Adams pulled her aside, recounting the scene with tenderness. Clara listened, her heart swelling with both sorrow and joy. She could picture it perfectly, her son rising, walking, falling, and being lifted not just by his shoes, but by the voices of those around him. That evening after dinner, Ethan told her the story himself. "I fell, Mom," he said, his voice heavy. Clara knelt before him, taking his small hands into hers. "Yes," she whispered, "but you also stood. And standing even for a moment is braver than never trying at all." He looked at her with wide eyes, then at the shoes waiting by the window. "Do you think the moon saw me?" Clara's throat tightened. She brushed a tear from her cheek before he could notice. "Yes, sweetheart. The moon sees everything, and I think it's very proud of you." That night, as she placed the shoes by the window, Clara lingered longer than usual. The shoes seemed to glow more brightly, as though they too had witnessed Ethan's first fall and his first step into courage. She whispered into the quiet night, "Thank you for every fall that teaches him to rise again. Falling is not failure. Falling is proof that we had the courage to rise in the first place. And often, the ground we stumble upon becomes the soil where strength is born. Music has a way of carrying memories across time, like a bridge that connects yesterday to today. A melody can linger for decades, hidden in the folds of the heart, waiting for the right moment to resurface. For Clara, that moment arrived one quiet evening, when the world outside had hushed itself into stillness. The day had been heavy. Ethan's legs had been weaker than usual, and even the short walk from the living room to the kitchen had left him tired and frustrated. Clara had tried to keep his spirits high, but she could see the weight pressing on him. He barely touched his dinner, staring at his plate with a distant look. When she tucked him into bed, his voice was small. "Mom, maybe I'll never run like the other kids." Clara's heart twisted. She brushed a curl of hair from his forehead, searching for words strong enough to hold him. "You will, Ethan. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But I believe in you, more than I believe in anything else." He nodded, though his eyes still glimmered with doubt. As his breathing slowed into the rhythm of sleep, Clara remained by his side, unwilling to leave just yet. And that's when it happened. A memory stirred inside her, a lullaby her own mother used to sing when Clara was a child. She hadn't thought of it in years, yet the words rose to her lips as if they had been waiting all along. "Hush now, little dreamer. The night will hold your fears. Tomorrow brings its sunrise and strength through all your tears." Her voice was soft, trembling at first, but as the melody filled the room, something shifted. Ethan stirred slightly in his sleep, his brow unfurrowing, as though the song reached into the heaviness of his little heart and lifted it. Clara continued, her voice steadier, pouring into each word all the love she carried. When the song ended, silence settled like a gentle blanket over the room. Clara sat for a long time, tears slipping down her cheeks, not of sorrow, but of something deeper, a mingling of grief and hope, of memory and promise. The next morning, Ethan surprised her. He was brighter, his eyes curious. "Mom?" he asked while she tied his shoes. "Was there music in my dream? I think I heard you singing." Clara smiled, kissing the top of his head. "Maybe you did. Music has a way of sneaking into our dreams." From then on, the lullaby became part of their nights. Whenever Ethan felt discouraged, Clara would hum the tune, and he would close his eyes as though it gave him strength no medicine could provide. Soon, he began humming it himself during therapy sessions, tiny whispers of the melody guiding each difficult step. The therapist noticed. "What's that you're humming, Ethan?" He grinned. It's a song my mom sings. It makes my legs feel lighter. Words spread among the children at school, too. One afternoon, when Ethan tried walking across the classroom, struggling with each step, one of his classmates softly began humming the tune. Then another joined in. Soon the room was filled with the gentle hum of Clara's lullaby, carried by young voices. Ethan, hearing it, lifted his chin. His steps grew steadier. He didn't make it all the way across the room that day, but he went farther than ever before, and when he collapsed into his chair, breathless and flushed, the class broke into applause. That evening, when Clara placed his shoes by the window, she whispered a quiet thank you, not just to the moon, but to her mother, whose song had crossed decades to find its way into her son's life. Music, she realized, was more than sound. It was a thread woven through generations, binding hearts together. It carried strength when words fell short, and hope when silence grew heavy. For Clara, the lullaby became a reminder that even in moments of despair, the past holds treasures we can pass forward. And for Ethan, it became a shield, a melody that reminded him he was never alone. Songs do not fade. They travel from heart to heart, from one generation to the next, carrying courage through time. And sometimes, the melody of yesterday is the very strength we need today. Words are invisible threads. Some slip through us and vanish. Others, however, tie themselves to our hearts, changing the way we see the world forever. For Ethan, one such thread was woven on an ordinary afternoon in the classroom when his teacher, Mrs. Adams, decided to speak from her heart. Ethan had been struggling that week. The excitement from the lullaby and his classmates' encouragement had carried him for a while, but the effort of therapy weighed heavily on his small body. Walking even a few steps left him exhausted, and his spirit dimmed with frustration. On Wednesday afternoon, Mrs. Adams noticed him sitting quietly at his desk, his pencil still, his eyes fixed on the window where the other children ran outside during recess. She approached softly, kneeling beside him. "What are you thinking about, Ethan?" she asked gently. He didn't meet her gaze. "I'm thinking, maybe I'll never be like them." His small hand gestured toward the window. "Maybe I'll always be the boy who just watches." Mrs. Adams felt a tug at her heart. She had taught many children, each carrying invisible burdens, but something in Ethan's voice, so small, yet filled with unspoken longing, moved her deeply. She placed a hand over his. "Ethan, do you know what makes a person great?" He shrugged. "Running fast? Being strong?" Mrs. Adams shook her head, smiling softly. "No. Greatness comes from trying when it's hard. From standing up even when you know you might fall. And do you know something? I've seen you do that more times than anyone else in this class." Ethan looked up at her then, his wide eyes searching hers. "Really, really," she said firmly. "Strength isn't always about legs or arms. Sometimes it's about the courage inside your heart. And you, Ethan, you have one of the strongest hearts I've ever seen." The words settled over him like sunlight breaking through clouds. He didn't reply right away, but something shifted in his posture. His shoulders straightened. His gaze lingered on the playground outside, not with envy this time, but with quiet determination. Later that week, Mrs. Adams asked Ethan to help her with something unusual. She was preparing a lesson on courage and wanted the class to think beyond superheroes and fairy tales. Standing at the front of the room, she invited Ethan forward. At first, he hesitated, his cane trembling slightly in his grip, but Mrs. Adams nodded encouragingly, and he took a slow step, then another, until he stood beside her. "Class," she began, "today I want to talk about true bravery. Many of you think bravery means fighting dragons or running the fastest race, but real bravery—" She paused, placing a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Is standing even when it's difficult. It's trying again after you fall. And I want you all to know, you have a hero sitting among you. His name is Ethan." The classroom grew quiet. A few children's mouths fell open in surprise. Then, slowly, applause began. Not the polite clapping of obligation, but genuine heartfelt claps that filled the room with warmth. Ethan flushed pink, gripping his cane tightly. For a moment he wanted to hide, but then he saw the pride in Mrs. Adams's eyes, and something inside him lifted. He wasn't just the boy who couldn't run. He was, as she said, a hero in his own way. That evening, as Clara prepared dinner, Ethan recounted the moment in detail. "Mom, Mrs. Adams told the whole class I was a hero." Clara's knife stilled over the cutting board. She turned to face him, eyes shining, and she was right. Ethan grinned, a spark of confidence flickering in his expression. "Do you think maybe I can be a hero for you too?" Clara knelt, embracing him tightly. "You already are, sweetheart. Every single day." Later, when she placed his shoes by the window, Clara whispered to the night, "Thank you for sending people who remind him of his worth." Because sometimes love at home wasn't enough. Sometimes a child needed to hear the truth from the world outside, to know that their struggle was not invisible, that their courage mattered. For Ethan, Mrs. Adams's words became more than encouragement. They became a foundation, a reminder he could return to whenever the road ahead felt too long, too heavy. And for Clara, they were a gift, proof that her son's light was seen, not just by her, but by others who believed in him too. Words, when spoken with kindness, can change the course of a life. They become seeds planted in tender soil, growing into courage that endures. Sometimes all it takes is one voice to remind us that our struggles are not weakness, but proof of strength. Storms are strange things. They come without warning, filling the air with electricity, shaking the walls of houses, and rattling windows. But storms do not only live in the sky, they also dwell inside the heart, silent, powerful, and sometimes more frightening than thunder itself. For Clara, both kinds of storms arrived one night in late spring. The day had been restless. Ethan had struggled more than usual at therapy, his steps faltering, his body refusing to cooperate. Though he tried to smile, Clara saw the frustration building in him, like rain clouds gathering on the horizon. She herself carried her own storm, a mix of exhaustion, fear, and the unspoken question that haunted her nights. What if he never walks freely? What if my hope is just a dream I can't let go? That evening, as dinner simmered on the stove, dark clouds gathered outside. The wind howled, bending the branches along Willow Street. By the time Clara tucked Ethan into bed, lightning flickered across the sky, and thunder cracked so loudly it seemed to shake the little house. Ethan gripped his blanket tightly. "Mom, I don't like the storm." Clara sat beside him, brushing her hand across his hair. "I know, sweetheart, but storms always pass. They roar, they frighten us, but in the morning the sun returns." Still, his eyes were wide, his small body tense. What if this storm doesn't end? Her heart ached at his words, for she felt the same about the storm inside herself. What if it never ends? What if I'm not enough to carry him through this? She swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Every storm ends, Ethan. That's a promise." The thunder rolled again, shaking the window. Clara tucked him in tighter, humming the lullaby softly. His breathing calmed, but long after he fell asleep, she remained in the room, staring at the shoes by the window, their silhouette illuminated by flashes of lightning. She whispered to herself, voice trembling, "Please, give me strength. I can't let him see my fear, not tonight." For a while, she sat in silence, listening to the storm rage. And then, in the stillness between thunderclaps, Ethan stirred. Half asleep, he mumbled words that pierced through the noise. "Don't cry, Mom. You're stronger than the storm." Clara froze, tears springing to her eyes. He was dreaming, perhaps, but his words felt like a message, a reflection of the courage he himself carried. She leaned close, whispering, "Oh, Ethan, you're the one who's strong." Outside, the storm raged on. Rain lashed against the windows. The wind howled through the cracks. But something shifted in Clara's heart. For the first time that night, she realized she didn't have to be unbreakable. Ethan's resilience, his childlike faith, was teaching her as much as she was teaching him. By dawn, the storm outside had passed. The world smelled of wet earth and fresh beginnings. Puddles shimmered on the street, and the air was cool and clean. Clara opened the window slightly, letting the morning breeze sweep through the room. The shoes by the sill glistened, touched by droplets of rain that had sneaked inside. Ethan stirred awake, rubbing his eyes. "Did the storm go away?" "Yes," Clara said softly. "It always does." He looked at the wet shoes and smiled faintly. Maybe the moon gave them extra power with the rain. Clara laughed through her tears. Maybe it did. That morning, as she helped him get ready, she realized something important. Storms would come again, both outside their little house and within their hearts. But as long as they faced them together, they would always find the calm after the thunder. Storms remind us of our fragility, but also of our resilience. They pass, leaving behind clearer skies and deeper roots. In life, as in nature, the fiercest tempests cannot last forever, and often they reveal a strength we didn't know we had. The journey of healing is rarely swift. It is not a single step, nor a sudden miracle. It is a long road, uneven, winding, filled with small victories and quiet setbacks. For Clara and Ethan, that road stretched across months and years, each day testing their patience, their hope, and their love. Every morning began the same way. Clara knelt by Ethan's bed, helping him into his little shoes. She tied the laces carefully, her hands steady even on the days her heart trembled. "One step at a time," she would whisper, her voice a steady rhythm. "That's all we need." Therapy became their battlefield and their sanctuary. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and determination, with posters of smiling children plastered on the walls. There were mats, parallel bars, and exercise balls, tools of progress, but also of struggle. Ethan learned to lift one foot, then the other, wobbling as though the earth beneath him swayed. Some days he managed a few steps, other days he collapsed in frustration, tears streaming down his face. "I can't do it, Mum," he cried once, fists clenched tightly. Clara gathered him into her arms, holding him until his sobs softened. "You can," she whispered, rocking him gently. "But even if you couldn't, I would still be proud. Do you know why?" "Why?" he sniffled. "Because you try. And trying is the bravest thing of all." Ethan buried his face in her shoulder, his small body trembling. Yet the next day he returned to the therapy room, determined once more. The therapists admired his spirit. "He has a resilience we don't often see," one remarked to Clara. She smiled, though inside she knew his resilience came not from her alone, but from something greater. Perhaps the quiet strength of his father living within him, or the prayers whispered into the night as she placed his shoes by the window. Seasons passed. In summer, the air grew heavy with warmth, and Ethan's laughter mixed with the sound of cicadas as he practiced outside, gripping Clara's hand while attempting to walk along the garden path. In autumn, leaves crunched beneath his tentative steps, the golden and crimson world cheering him on. Winter brought challenges. The cold stiffened his legs, but Clara wrapped him in layers, humming the lullaby as he tried again inside their small living room. The road was long, and it was tiring. There were days Clara doubted, nights when she collapsed onto her bed after Ethan had fallen asleep, whispering to the ceiling, "How much longer? Will this ever be enough?" But then there were the small miracles. The day Ethan managed 5 steps without his cane, the moment he stood for nearly a full minute on his own, grinning with triumph, the morning he tied one of his shoelaces by himself, fumbling fingers but steady determination. Each victory was like a star, tiny but bright, guiding them through the darkness. One afternoon, as they left therapy, Ethan tugged at Clara's hand. "Mum, do you think the road ever ends?" Clara paused, looking at him. His face was earnest, eyes wide with the kind of seriousness only a child could carry. "I don't think it ends, sweetheart," she said after a moment. "I think the road keeps going, and along the way, we grow stronger. Some days the road feels steep. Other days, it feels smooth. But every step we take makes us braver." Ethan thought about this, then nodded. "Then I'll keep walking, even if it takes forever." Clara squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with both pride and ache. "That's all I ask." That night, as the shoes rested on the windowsill, the moonlight spilled over them like a blessing. Clara stared at them for a long time, her thoughts drifting. She realized that the long road wasn't just Ethan's, it was hers too. And though it often felt endless, it was leading them somewhere beautiful, even if they couldn't yet see the destination. Life's long road is not meant to be rushed. It teaches us patience, perseverance, and the quiet beauty of progress. Each step, no matter how small, is a triumph, a reminder that strength is built not in a single leap, but in the courage to keep moving forward. It was a crisp spring morning, the kind that smelled of new beginnings. The sky stretched wide and blue above Willow Street, and the air carried the laughter of children as neighbors gathered for the town's annual community fair. Stalls lined the sidewalks, filled with homemade pies, knitted scarves, and jars of honey. The scent of popcorn and cotton candy drifted through the breeze, pulling everyone into its warmth. Clara hadn't planned to bring Ethan that day. She worried the noise and bustle would tire him. But Ethan had insisted, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Please, Mum, I just want to be there. I want to see everything." So she agreed, and they walked hand in hand to the square, Ethan's cane tapping softly against the pavement. Every few steps, Clara asked if he was tired, but Ethan only shook his head, grinning. He wanted to belong, to be part of the joy that filled the street. As they wandered past a stall filled with bright balloons, a voice rang out from the center of the fair. "Everyone gather around, it's time for the children's race." Ethan froze, his fingers tightened on Clara's hand. The race was simple, a dash from one end of the park to the other, children lined up eagerly, sneakers bouncing, faces lit with anticipation. Parents cheered, cameras ready. It was a tradition, a moment of pure childhood celebration. Clara felt Ethan tug at her sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, his voice small but firm, "I want to try." Her heart stopped. "Ethan," she began carefully, "maybe this isn't—" But he looked up at her, eyes shining with the determination she knew too well. "I know I won't win. I just want to try." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to protect him, to shield him from the possibility of stumbling in front of everyone, of hearing whispers of pity, but she also remembered the long road they had walked together, the countless times he had fallen and risen again. So she nodded. "Okay, my love. If you want to try, I'll be right here." The announcer called for children to line up. Ethan took his place at the far end, cane in hand. The other children glanced at him curiously, but said nothing. Clara stood nearby, her heart pounding so loudly she could hardly hear the countdown. 3, 2, 1, go! The children surged forward, legs pumping, arms swinging. Ethan moved more slowly, planting each step with care, his cane tapping rhythmically. He wobbled once, nearly losing his balance, but he steadied himself and kept going. The crowd cheered for the front runners, but soon the sound shifted. Whispers rose, then claps, then voices calling out. Clara realized with a jolt they were cheering for Ethan. "Come on, buddy! You've got this! Keep going!" Ethan's face flushed with effort. His breaths came fast, but his eyes burned with fire. Step by step, he moved forward. Not fast, not steady, but unstoppable. By the time the other children had crossed the finish line, the crowd's attention had turned entirely to him. Strangers leaned forward, hands cupped around their mouths, voices rising like a wave. Clara felt tears blur her vision. She wanted to run to him, to scoop him up, but she held herself back. This was his moment. At last, Ethan crossed the finish line. He stumbled into Clara's arms, chest heaving, sweat on his forehead. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then the crowd erupted in applause. Ethan looked up at her, panting. "Mom, did you see? I did it." Clara kissed his damp hair, holding him close. "Yes, sweetheart, you did more than that. You finished your race." Later, as they walked home, Ethan held his little participation ribbon tightly in his hand. To others, it was just a token. To Ethan, it was proof. Proof that he could stand on the same ground as everyone else, even if his steps looked different. That night, as Clara placed the ribbon beside his shoes on the windowsill, she whispered to the stars, "Thank you for his courage, for this moment, for reminding me that sometimes the greatest victories are not about winning, but about showing up with all the strength you have. In life, the true race is not against others, but against our own fears. Victory is not measured by speed, but by the courage to keep moving forward, even when the world watches. For every small step we take with faith, we win a race that no one else can run for us." Some moments arrive quietly, almost without warning, yet they carry the weight of a lifetime. For Clara and Ethan, that moment came one late afternoon in early summer, when the golden sun spilled across Willow Street, painting everything in warm amber. The day had begun like any other, with therapy sessions and careful steps, but there was an air of anticipation. Ethan had practiced tirelessly for weeks, determined to walk without assistance for a small stretch of the park's path. Clara watched him from a short distance, heart pounding, knowing that the effort had cost him tears and fatigue. She also knew that today, something within him felt different, stronger, braver, ready. "Mom," he said, tugging gently at her sleeve, "I think I can do it today." Clara smiled, kneeling to meet his eyes. "I think so too, sweetheart. But remember, no matter what, I'm proud of you." Hand in hand, they stepped onto the path, the familiar scents of grass, summer flowers, and the faint aroma of the nearby bakery mingled, carrying memories of countless afternoons spent together. Ethan planted his feet carefully, each step deliberate, measured. But today he didn't falter. Today, the rhythm of his courage carried him forward. Step after step, he moved a little farther than the day before, and then a little farther still. Clara's heart raced alongside him, silent cheers brimming behind her tears. Nearby, neighbors paused to watch. Children who once whispered at his struggles now gazed in awe. Even Mrs. Adams, standing at the edge of the park, had tears glistening in her eyes. And then it happened. Without warning, Ethan reached the end of the path, the place he had once thought unreachable. He stopped, chest heaving, sweat glistening on his forehead, and turned to look at Clara. His small frame quivered with exertion and pride. "Mom!" he exclaimed, voice bright with triumph. "I did it! I really did it!" Clara ran to him, enveloping him in the tightest embrace she could muster. Their hearts beat together, two souls connected through years of struggle, patience, and unwavering love. Her tears soaked his shirt, but he didn't mind. He laughed, a sound so pure it seemed to shimmer in the warm sunlight. "You did it, Ethan," she whispered again and again. "You've done it, my brave boy." He buried his face in her shoulder, whispering back, "I couldn't have done it without you." Clara shook her head, smiling through her tears. "No, sweetheart. You did it, all on your own. I only held your hand along the way." The neighbors clapped softly, a quiet acknowledgement of a victory far greater than a race or a path crossed. It was a victory of spirit, a triumph over the invisible chains that had tried to hold Ethan back. It was proof that love, patience, and belief could carve miracles out of ordinary days. Later, as they walked home slowly, Clara held Ethan's hand in hers, marveling at the simple grace of the world, the wind rustling through the leaves, the golden sunlight casting long shadows, and the distant laughter of children running freely, unaware of the depth of the moment they had witnessed. At home, when she placed Ethan's shoes by the window that night, she lingered longer than usual, brushing a gentle hand over the worn leather. "You've grown stronger," she whispered, "and so has my heart." Ethan, watching from the doorway, smiled softly. "I think the moon helped again." Clara laughed, pulling him close one more time. "Yes, my love, the moon, the stars, and every quiet prayer we ever whispered." In that embrace, years of worry, doubt, and fear melted into gratitude. Every sleepless night, every tear, every whispered lullaby, every small step along the long road, it had all led to this single, luminous moment. For the elderly who might hear their story, it was a reminder. Life is a collection of fleeting moments, but the ones filled with courage, love, and perseverance linger forever. Some victories are quiet. Others, like Ethan's, shine so brightly they illuminate the hearts of everyone around them. True triumph is found not in never falling, but in rising with love, courage, and determination. The embrace of a parent and child, forged through struggle and hope, is a celebration of every small step that led to that moment. Life's greatest victories often come quietly, but they resonate forever. Years had passed since Ethan first placed his little shoes by the windowsill. The shoes, now scuffed and softened by time, remained a symbol, not of limitation, but of hope, perseverance, and love. Clara often found herself gazing at them, remembering the nights when she had whispered prayers into the dark, believing in miracles that only patience could bring. Ethan, now taller and stronger, no longer needed his cane. Yet, every evening, he still paused by the window, touching the shoes with gentle reverence. They were reminders of where he had come from, of the small steps that had led to great triumphs, and of the unwavering heart of a mother who had never stopped believing in him. On this particular evening, the sun was setting in shades of orange and gold, casting long shadows across the room. Clara sat in her favorite chair, knitting quietly, while Ethan traced patterns on the windowsill. The town outside hummed with the familiar sounds of life, children's laughter drifting from the park, a dog barking in the distance, the faint rumble of a car on the cobbled street. "Mom," Ethan said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "do you remember the first time I tried to walk across the playground?" Clara smiled, her eyes glistening. "I do, sweetheart. How could I forget?" "I was so scared," he admitted. "I thought I'd never make it. But you never gave up on me." Clara reached out, holding his hand. "I didn't give up on you because I didn't need to. You were always trying. You were always brave. I just got the honor of walking beside you." Ethan's gaze drifted to the window. "These shoes, they've been with me through everything. Even now I feel like they remind me that I can face anything." Clara nodded softly. "They are reminders that life is full of small steps, each one carrying its own strength. And that hope, like the moonlight shining through the window, never leaves us, even when we can't see it." For a moment, they sat together in silence, letting the memories wash over them. The long months of struggle, the therapy sessions, the small victories and painful falls, all of it had shaped not only Ethan, but Clara as well. Every step had been a lesson in patience, perseverance, and unconditional love. As night fell, Clara placed her hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Life is much like this window," she said, her voice gentle but strong. "It frames our memories, our struggles, and our triumphs. It lets the light in, but it also reminds us of the storms we've survived. And each day, we choose whether to look out or to stay in the dark." Ethan smiled, understanding more than words could convey. "Then I'll keep looking out," he said, "because I've seen the light, and I know it's worth it." Clara felt tears well up, not of sorrow, but of quiet gratitude. In that single moment she realized that every whispered lullaby, every careful step, every sleepless night had been leading to this clarity. The journey had been long, the road difficult, but the view from this window, the view of life, love, and hope, was more beautiful than she could have imagined. Later, as she tucked Ethan into bed one last time that night, she whispered a prayer, not for miracles anymore, but for gratitude. "Thank you for the courage, the patience, and the love that has carried us here." Ethan, sleepy but content, reached for her hand. "Mom, thank you." Clara kissed his forehead. "No, my love. Thank you for teaching me about courage." She returned to the window and gazed at the shoes, now slightly faded but still steadfast. They had witnessed every tear and every triumph, and as the moonlight spilled over them, Clara understood fully the window was not just a place for shoes, but a symbol of life itself. Fragile yet enduring, quiet yet powerful, filled with endless possibilities. Life is a series of steps, some small, some great, some uncertain. The love we give, the hope we nurture, and the courage we carry illuminate the path forward. Like shoes by a windowsill, every challenge we face becomes part of the journey, and every triumph, no matter how quiet, leaves a lasting light. In the end, it is not how fast we run, but the heart we bring to every step that defines a life well lived.